Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom, a novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 18: The Townhouse. It was early evening. The sun had gone down, and that part of the house was cool and pleasant enough with an occasional breeze. This open sky area was in the middle of the house, allowing air to circulate throughout the whole length. Only the rooms next to it had windows. The inner rooms had none, like most townhouses in Saigon. The glow of electric light from the Fan family, their next-door neighbors, was shimmering through from above, and it was enough to keep Luke company. His house was still in twilight. Mother had asked them to conserve electricity as much as possible and only turn on their lights when it was dark. The common wall dividing the two adjacent houses was streaked with the varied vertical green shapes of slime mold, formed from years of rain pouring down the wall. It had sometimes been whitewashed in the past, but not lately. That was the least concern in the minds of the occupiers at the moment. The appearance of their residence was of minimal importance. Most of the houses and existing buildings in the south were derelict and had been neglected for a few years now. There were other urgent matters to attend to, like food and clothing. The absence of daylight made the green shapes darker and more mysterious. Some looked like animals, elephants, or horses, and some looked like dancing snakes in Luke's imagination. The top of the wall was laden with mixed and matched broken glass from bottles. The edges were sharp, rising 5 centimeters high as an optimal barricade to prevent the intrusion of strangers or the residents of one house to the other. The base was also green with moss. Drin and Luke used to jump up on the edge of the tank and slide down, scraping off the moss to feed the fighting fish during the summer when the trendy season was in. The 1.5 by 1 by 1 meter rectangular water tank was built in next to the wall and constructed of cement and brick. During the war, it had to be regularly filled with tap water to at least halfway or to the brim, in case there was a siege like the one during the Tet Offensive of 1968. The bottom of the tank was also slimy with green mold, as was normal with stagnant water in sunlight. Sometimes it had to be emptied and scrubbed clean, but most of the time it was left there. The water reservoir was a presence as comforting as any other was for Saigon's residents. Just like food, rice, and water, the essential necessities for every household during wartime. Even now, though living in Australia or elsewhere around the world, the habit of storing extra food in the house was still hard to eradicate for most Vietnamese. It was rooted deep inside their minds, the fear of having no food or water to live on, the horrifying realization from past experience that there was no one to turn to for help but themselves was somehow permanent in many generations of the bitter, war-born population, especially Drin's parents and like-minded people. The pantry always had to have enough food to last at least a month or so in their house, and the habit continued. It was not only for the fish that the kids used to hop on the side of the reservoir, tiptoeing along the edge to reach up for moss. They also used to have a peek and Mrs. Fan's clock on the other side of the wall for the time to go to school. Their grandfather clock needed winding up. It seemed no one had enough time to do that, and it was easier to peek through the wall. The beautiful green moss was smooth as velvet, and always there was a green plant for Trin to look at, something that grew on and on without help, lush and fresh, permanent in the tropical weather. Noise was easily overheard between the neighbors through that open space, including shouting or yelling in heated arguments between the members of their household. Privacy was a privilege in those times. It seemed everyone accepted that space, and everything else was shared without question. Common bedrooms were normal, with 5 or 6 children in one big dormitory room. Crowds were not a concern at all. People were happy to share and lived in harmony despite hardship and encumbrances. Children stayed together in big or small places and were content with crude toys or none at all to play with, or just enjoyed running around in the open air. They had the company of other children, and that was enough. Interactions between one human being and the next were essential and easily accepted. There was no isolation. Back then, depression was a foreign word. People were trained to readily put up with adversity, as much as to tolerate suffering without leaving mental scars. In doing that, they tended to bury or forget the ugly incidents in order to be able to live on. But that is not to say they were immune to grief and sorrow. Their tolerance was just growing along with their misery and difficulty. They laughed bitterly and shrugged their shoulders like bearing another unavoidable burden. They took it all in, and sometimes they began to believe they received those burdens as their destiny, a testing curse that would soon pass. Quietly and patiently, they were all waiting for it to pass. The influence of Buddha's teaching was prominent in their belief. However, their acceptance of hardship sometimes turned against them, as it could very well diminish their will to fight, leaving them weakened and vulnerable to oppression. Like most townhouses in Saigon, Luke's was narrow, about 6 meters in width, and elongated, with 5 rooms from front to back. There was a semi-second floor section at the back as a dormitory section for the children, and a covered patio at the rear as a garage for bikes. The front room was used as a garage at night for father's car when it was still in his possession. A Ladalac manufactured from the first automobile company in Vietnam in the early 1970s was his latest one. During the day, it was arranged as a lounge or living room. Then the dining room followed, and next to it was their parents' room. Next was the large, spacious kitchen with the high ceiling and the open sky area where Luke immersed himself in the bathtub and in his dreams. In the kitchen there was a divan, a prominent piece of furniture that was very much a symbol of a South Vietnamese home. The rectangular hardwood divan was as big as a king-sized bed and was usually made of teak or lesser wood, depending on the wealth of its owner. It was as characteristic a feature of Vietnam as in Ao Dai. Everything was done on that rectangular piece of furniture, a treasured traditional image for every Vietnamese. Trin remembered it well. It was converted into a bed at night simply by placing the mosquito net over it. She used to sleep at her mother's feet on that divan when her father was away on his official trips. Its surface was shiny and polished with regular use. Like other Vietnamese families, theirs used the divan as the center of activity. Many would gather around, sitting on its rectangular hardwood surface, and talk, eat, prepare meals, debate political issues, confer over family matters, and just about do anything. It was where they sat waiting for the announcement of the surrender from President General Nguyen Van Minh on that historical day. When that piece of furniture was sold for food and necessities, they all cried as if someone had died. It was as dear to them as a close relative. There was another common sleeping quarter further back in the house before it ended with a covered patio for parking bikes at the rear. The house was considered large enough and functional for a family of 7 children in Saigon at that time. It was grouped together in a row of townhouses, about a dozen in number, stretched lengthwise across the boulevard and the avenue in District 1, leaving every house on the neighborhood 2 entrances, the front and back. The neighborhood was once a prestigious area, quiet and aristocratic, as the District 1 residential area of Saigon was normally for the affluent, well-to-do class. The boulevard was lined with tall, handsome Dipterocarpus zeylanicus trees on both sides. Their straight trunks reached to the sky, with 2 winged fruits, sometimes scattering down on the breeze, poetic and enchanting in the summer evenings. Their heavy round base acted as a center of gravity, and sometimes they would spin in the air with the turbulence of the wind, their double wings upright. Drin used to chase after the 2-winged fruit, letting it land upright in her small open palms and laughing with joy with each successful catch. When the wind was strong and turbulent, Juan, Kim, Drin, and Luke would run excitedly with the change of season. racing with each other to gather the large, dry leaves falling from the sky. They gathered the prominent, veiny leaves in separate piles to compare whose was the largest. Later, the piles were combined together with twigs and branches and lit with matches in a pretend campfire. The gang of four would sit around in a circle under the warm glow of fire and wispy smoke and listen to the happy crackling noise of wood catching fire. Sometimes Nguyen would join in if he were on leave. Then, putting on important airs to debate nonsense or laughing merrily for no reason other than mischievously playing with fire unnoticed by adults. They were happy for a little while at least. In some parts of the street, further away from their house, the tops of the trees entwined with each other, blocking out most of the blazing sun in the fiery hot afternoon. The boulevard became the much-loved street of most high school boys and girls in Saigon. The row of townhouses remained dearest in Trin's memory. Some were twice the size of the others in width, but most were very much the same in their outer design. Most had trellis iron gates or full metal gates of different colors and patterns. Those gates seemed out of bounds to the general public, carrying a distinguished and forbidden air of refined dignity, separating the occupants from the harshness of common life. Like the forbidding gates of the Chinese, they were hardly open, and to sneak a glimpse into the life of those behind was almost a privilege. That was before the invasion. Now the whole neighborhood had to blend in with the rest of the South, reduced to one common class, which was the most honorable class in the government's slogan. Everyone is equal in status.